Welcome everybody. Good to see you. Welcome to this infield flowering strips workshop today. It's part of the Strategic Farm Summer Month. My name is Richard Meredith, and I head up the Arable Knowledge Exchange team, AHDB, and it's my pleasure to chair this session for you today. Going to run through just some kind of housekeeping for the day. The first one is if you could all place yourselves on mute if you're not talking. Just it eliminates any feedback that we might receive. There's plenty of opportunity to ask questions throughout the session we've got, either in the chat box, and I'll keep an eye on it as chair and ask the speakers for you, or you've got a little hand that you can raise to get our attention, and we can give you the floor to speak to the speakers. The general kind of ethos of these workshops is to kind of have a smaller group of people together and allow that discussion and allow that environment for you to ask some questions. So it's kind of a bit different to the webinars that we're used to, which are kind of going for kind of large quantities of people. This is more kind of smaller groups with specific topics. Now we're looking to start obviously now at 8:30, and then we're going to be going through. We're as you can probably pick up, we're hoping to get hold of Richard Pywell to check he's online in a moment. So we're going to switch the agenda around slightly, and I'll come on to that now. If there's any objections to the meeting being recorded, please let us know. But we are just going to record that, and we do use it on the HDB channel so that the legacy lives on forever afterwards. If you would like basis or erosive points, we've submitted for those for this workshop. What you need to do is complete the form available in the chat for the basis points, and for erosive, put your name, erosive number, and the postcode in the chat. So if you do those, then we'll happily fill those out and put them over to the relevant organisation. So the kind of general ethos for today is all about flowering strips, boosting beneficials, and through the use of flowering strips. Julian will come on and give us a bit of an introduction of what he's been doing, and we're really kind of going to be looking at kind of can flowering strips in the fields be the answer to controlling your pests for now and the future, and do they attract beneficials and natural enemies for you? So we'll be going to Julian Gold. Julian we've worked with for a long time now. He's been a monitor farmer and since retired, and we keep on pulling him back into the HDB fold because he's got so much useful knowledge and information that we need to draw upon. Julian's been giving his opinion, his experiences as a farmer doing this, and he's been working with Richard Pywell from the Centre for Hydrology and Ecology. And Richard, as Julian said earlier, Richard will be giving us a bit more of a kind of a technical look at kind of why and how you use infield flowering strips to boost to control insects on your farm. So we'll end to round up the meeting by kind of 9:45 to 10 o'clock, just depending on kind of how much discussion that we get. So I'm going to take that off my screen now and stop sharing. And I think we're going to hand over to you, Julian. Julian's going to set the scene. He's got some slides with some pictures to show you what he's been up to on farm. Julian, thank you very much for taking the time out this morning, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Richard. Hopefully everybody can see. Is that all showing properly?
Yeah.
Right. I'm just going to talk about what we've been doing and a bit of an introduction as to why and how it's worked so far, and how I think I'm going to sort of keep evolving in the future. So the first question is, why would you consider putting infield strips in, flowering strips in? And I think that there's actually a couple of step thought process which leads you to infield flowering strips as quite a logical conclusion to use on farm. This isn't one of the reasons, in my opinion. So some people might think, okay, alms money, let's get some money to replace BPS. But as you'll see when I bring the costings up, I don't think anybody's going to be wanting to do it for the money. So I don't think that might be some people's reason for doing it, but I don't think it's a valid reason. It's all about mindset change. My mindset change happened probably about 12, 15 years ago now. I've always been into husbanding my soil and soil health, but I'd never really been into the husbanding the wider ecosystem that I'm farming in until I got my own bees. And then suddenly, you know, the insecticides I was spraying and the habitats I was destroying, it was affecting my bees, not just any old bees. So it all becomes up close and personal. So a switch went in my head, really. and I sort of realised the importance of the wider ecosystem we were farming in. And if I can just bore you with an analogy that I float all the time, I think it's really good, but you might like it, you might not like it. This is the real analogy that I work to as well. You know, you've got the car manufacturer, he's got a production line producing cars, making a profit. He's diverting some of that profit to maintain the factory premises. No one's paying him to do that. There's no government scheme saying here's some cash to maintain your factory premises. It's just an obvious thing to do. If the roof falls in, if the gutters fall off, you haven't got a functioning production line, so your business doesn't exist. I think that so it's just an automatic part of the business. I think, this is a personal view, industrial agriculture has spectacularly failed to maintain its factory premises. If we take the factory premises to be the ecosystems we're working in, the natural ecosystems, I think in the last 50 years, we've basically put nature through the mincer. And as you can see on the right there, soils degraded and habitats have degraded. We've ended up with monocultures everywhere and degraded soils, degraded habitats. And if farming can come around to thinking about that, this is an obvious thing that we have to do. We have to maintain our factory premises. We have to divert some of our profit because the wheels will drop off eventually, because we've got benefits from having healthy soil, from having beneficials. And when we haven't got the inputs because they're either too expensive or they don't work anymore, everything's resistant to insecticides, weeds are resistant to herbicides, diseases are resistant to fungicides. We're then relying on the natural ecosystems to actually support the production line. And so once you get into that mindset, you think to yourself, well, how can we bring biodiversity into my farming operations? So I've tried the various options and got the t-shirt, companion cropping, clover understories. It's all very complex. It doesn't work very well. It's difficult putting species together with your cash crop. The only one that really works is obviously the companion crops with oilseed rape, but the others are difficult. They're difficult to harvest, they're difficult to manage, they're difficult to separate and store. So then you sort of think to yourself, well, what's another way of bringing in-field biodiversity? And the obvious one is in-field strips. So just going through that thought process, it takes you to in-field strips really as a logical thing. You can keep farming the cash crop quite simply and separately, but you have got these reservoirs of beneficials and they can do useful things. This is how we're laying them out. We're laying them out about 90 meters apart. I've got 30-meter tram lines. This is actually the field that's in the Assist project, and you'll see, if you can see my pointer, the strips run to the edge of the field. We've got edge strips and we've got 2 strips down the field, and they run to the edge. The new ones that I'm putting in with Countryside Stewardship, I stop them 30 meters from the end. It's much easier to manage the field. You can just crop the headland round, and the strips are sort of separate entities within the field. The ecologist, Richard, will say that I need that linkage to get things in, but at the end of the day, it's all a bit of a compromise. And if you've got a lot of these in a lot of fields on the farm, you want to be able to manage the headlands separately. So theoretically here, all the beneficials can cover the whole field. The scientific papers tell you that beneficials go about 50 meters into the field. So here, the maximum distance anything's got to go is about 45 meters. And technically, they can cover my whole field. I'm ducking and diving about a little bit. This is just a slide on establishment costs. So if you say, I've taken the assumption that a wildflower strip will last about 5 years before it needs redoing. So if you take the cultivation costs, a shaker rate of power harrow, Cambridge roll, spray off the stale seedbed, broadcast the seed, Cambridge roll it a couple of times. That's your cultivation cost per hectare. You've got a couple of litres of glyphosate, and then you've got the seed cost. Now, the seed cost is a very variable feast, depending on the seed rate you use and the seed source. The range is about 220 to about £2,500 a hectare, depending whether you buy sort of native wildflower seeds that have been hand harvested from a meadow, or whether you buy a more sort of commercial seed mix. And also on a very fertile, a lot of the commercial seed mixes out there have got a bit too much grass in, and on a very fertile site, it pays to reduce the seed rate of the mix a little bit and top up with pure wildflowers to increase the wildflower content. Otherwise, you end up with grass predominating because wildflowers don't like fertility. So what I've done there, I've just assumed a cost of, say, £350. So anyway, if you take all those establishment costs and divide them by 5 years, that's the annual cost per year there of the establishment. Obviously, the seed's the biggest one at £70 a hectare a year. Mowing and baling and carting off, we'll talk about management in a minute. I've taken an assumption there. Obviously, it depends how big your strips are and how dotted about the farm they are, because there's a lot of running about. It's not like farming a 40-hectare field. If you've got half a hectare here, half a hectare there, there's a lot of wasted time in management. So I've taken that £150 a hectare. And then this is the big problem, crop gross margin forgone. On my good land, I'm working on this is very ish at the moment, an average gross margin across my rotation of around £750 a hectare. So if I put my income forgone into the equation, my strips have cost me £994 a hectare, and the mid-tier payment is £539. So it all hinges, if you want to make money out of your strips, it depends on the quality of the land you're on and this opportunity cost. Because of the factory premises analogy, I'm quite happy that the strips are costing me money because it's factory maintenance. I'm maintaining the ecosystem, and it's a valid business cost that I'm not expecting a direct return from. We can come back to that anyway, so no doubt people have questions on that. Management of the strips, the edge management is quite important because to try and stop the ingress of fertilizer and pesticides, and it is actually quite difficult, particularly the fertilizer. If you're not careful, the strip width just gets eaten away at. We've got an adaptation on the sprayer to try and stop spray ingress, and we just have to try and be as careful as we can when we're fertilizing. These are the ends where they join up to from my overhead slide that I posted a few slides ago. This shows on the ground the ends where they join to the headlands. The headland is down on the bottom of the slide here, and these are gradually getting eaten away at because as you're going around the headland and you're spraying and you're switching on and off, it's difficult. And also we're fertilizing through the strips, so the biodiversity in the 30 meters that joins the headland is basically disappeared because it gets nitrogen fertilizer. So I mean, that's a good discussion point, is whether you carry them through the headland. Managing them, to manage them properly in a fertile environment, you've really got to not do the cheap and nasty option of just topping. You've got to bale, mow, bale and cart off, which adds quite a lot to the cost, but it's the right thing to do to keep the strips functioning. I think there's a real big market for dedicated machinery. These are interesting ones that were in the Farmers Weekly awards. This was a guy, this left-hand one, where he'd got a topper and welded it to the front of a baler. I think it was actually a baler wrapper, so you could literally drive down the strip cutting it and collecting it. That was a home-built thing. This was a more complex one where he'd reverse the drive on a forage harvester and put a topper on the front. So he got a topper followed by a precision chop forage harvester and towing the trailer. Again, that's a one-cut operation. But I think this is a real issue going forwards. If you've got a lot of strips on the farm, I think there's a real market here for contractors to develop kit or farmers to develop kit, because it takes a lot of time to muck about with lots of different machines. This is an interesting one. Are there any benefits? Now, Richard will hopefully comment on this as well. So this is the assist experiment. So I've got a field in the bottom left corner here where I've got the pointer. That's got no wildflower strips. That's treatment 1 field. This field up on the top right has got wildflower strips on 2 edges down that side and down that side. And treatment 3 has got them on the 2 ends and through the field. Now, all these fields are in the same rotation block. They were all, in this year, they were all oilseed rape after chopped winter barley straw, and they were all treated identically. It was the same varieties, drilled on the same day, harvested on the same day. the two fields that didn't have the infield strips ravaged by slugs, and this one wasn't. Now, I like to think it's because I had a load of carabid beetles living in the strips, and they wandered out into the field and ate all the slugs. The data that they're collecting from the ASSIST project hopefully will tell us if that was the case eventually, but there's a lot of data. I'm not sure it's all collated, but the scientists do come out and count carabid beetles. What it looked like on the ground, that's what it looked like on the ground. That was one of the fields where the slugs were ravaging it, and that was the same field. And this was the one with the infield wildflower strips with a complete crop. I'm just on a Zoom call, sorry. This just shows you the biodiversity by the grass strips. That was a sticky trap in the middle of a wheat field. There's lots of insects on it, but they're all pretty the same insect. I'm not an entomologist, but there was a lot of little black insects that all look the same on that one. Whereas if you put a sticky trap nearer to grass strips, the biodiversity of the insect catch is just amazing. You've got all these blue and different coloured things, and I don't know what they are, but the biodiversity is really obvious to see. So something's happening. This is just a little one that I always put out there because it's really quite interesting. It was a bit of a byproduct from the strips. The deer love them. Traditionally on the farm, on the left, the bottom left slide here, you can see combining. We've got loads of deer damage where they've been lying and grazing at harvest time. In the field with the ASSIST strips, there's never any deer damage in the crop because they love the strips. They lie on the strips, they run down the strips, they graze the strips. They don't venture near the crop because they like the strips so much. So it's interesting side benefit. It keeps the deer out of the crop. Where would I go in the future? There's just the last few little slides. I think on north-south strips, an obvious thing is to put trees in them as well to increase the biodiversity, increase the carbon capture, and really sort of build the benefits. My owners aren't brilliantly happy about me putting trees in fields, which is why agroforestry is slow in the UK generally, because a lot of owners have the same thinking. But what I have persuaded them to do is on one of my strips, we've got a little trial that we planted this year. I've called it Hydrology. So actually this is quite a wide strip because I was allowing enough width to put the trial in. If I was doing the commercially, I'd do the strip narrower. It's actually a 12-metre strip, and on half of it I've got some Hazel Coppice. So here what we've planted there, I think they're 2 metres apart, and the rows, I think the rows are about 1 metre apart. So there's 2 rows staggered, and I'm hoping when that grows up we can coppice one side at a time. So there's always biomass and habitat, and it means that we can deal with it with machinery quite easily, either a circular saw blade or a chainsaw with farm equipment, and manage it. And it's going to build carbon capture and build biodiversity. And on the other end of the strip, we've just put a native hedge, which we can deal with a tractor hedge cutter. And the thinking behind this was to actually build the biodiversity benefits and build the carbon capture benefits, but make it more palatable to farmers than agroforestry, because I think a lot of farmers, they're put off with trees in fields. A, they don't want stumps in fields if they go off the idea, and B, it's managing the trees and knowing how to manage them. Whereas a system like this is much more palatable because farmers have already got the machinery, they're much easier to manage. So I think that's a real interest going forwards. The other thing I would do going forwards with my normal 6-metre strips, I would make them 8 metres wide, I think, and I would put 1 metre either side of tussocky grasses, like a beetlebank mix, to protect the grass strip, the wildflower strip, from sprays and fertiliser ingress. So you're almost putting a barrier down the sides, a wall, but a natural wall. So I think that in future, in elms, I'll do them 8 metres wide rather than 6 metres wide. So the last thing is, hopefully Marek won't mind me plugging him. One of the things Richard's put on the notes is one of my top tips for others thinking about putting these strips in. My top tip would be to talk to Marek Nowakaski from the Wildlife Farming Company, because he knows everything about strips and he's got a hell of a lot of knowledge, way more than I've got. I think that'll just do me, Richard, for now, just as a bit of an introduction on what we're doing. Is that fine?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Julian. I've got a couple of questions, if that's all right, on the back of that, as we go into it. You mentioned there kind of at the end there, like natural rules or barriers. What's your view on hedgerows? Because obviously they're a great benefit for diversity, but then in terms of migration of pests, do you think they're acting as a barrier to their movement?
Hang on a sec. Do I think that hedgerows are
they helping or hindering the movement?
the hedgerows are helping because they're carbon capture and they're, there's pollen and nectar for beneficials and homes for beneficials. Anything that you can, any biodiversity you can put in amongst your arable cropping is, sorry to be boring with my analogy, but it's factory maintenance. It's all helping. It's all helping. And if you're getting paid, and I don't think we should expect to be paid for it. That's another discussion itself. If farming was profitable enough, like the car manufacturer, we should be just naturally and happily just doing this stuff without being paid, because it's good business practice.
And that 540 per hectare you mentioned at the beginning, is it option AB8? Do you do it under that?
AB8, yeah.
Okay.
Let me just get rid of my screen share. Have I stopped sharing my screen now?
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
And you also said about kind of it's kind of, it makes most sense for you to bail them, but what about if that's not an option for somebody? Kind of what about really finely chopping in terms of managing and letting nature take its course in the sunlight? What's your view there? Is mowing the only way, taking it off?
Well, Richard will have a view on this as well when he comes on, but strictly you need to be taking fertility off. I'm talking about highly fertile 12 tons a hectare wheatland, and it's a bit of a different beast. Putting strips on your end headlands in your less fertile situation where it's a bit compacted and a bit shady, but there's too much fertility for the flowers to really thrive. So you need to be carting the fertility off annually to do the job properly. You need to cart off, in my mind.
Well, you could blow it into the crop, the stubble, if you had such a thing as an old forage harvester, but there aren't many of those left. But something that would blow it onto the stubble, so you don't have to cart it, would be a good idea.
But potentially you're blowing weed seeds into your field, so some people might not like that idea.
Julian, does your gross margin of the cash crop in the remainder of the field go up because of less inputs required, therefore making use of beneficials, etc., and hence income foregone may not be as high as 750? What do you think?
Okay, well, this is a big discussion, isn't it? It's the big picture. I'm pretty certain. Okay, no, insecticides don't work anymore. Effectively, in my mind, everything's resistant to the insecticides we've got left, virtually. And it's the same with so, and it's like that picture I did of the oilseed rape. I've got effectively I'm getting free control of pests, and so it's hard to quantify the value. That costing I put on there was actually the specific cost of putting the strip in and the return from the payment, but it's hard to quantify the benefit it's putting into the field. But it ultimately it has to be a benefit, because, as I said at the start, when all the pesticides stop working, I've pretty well got to walk away from blackgrass sprays now because they just don't work. I need to get an inter-row hoe. And when Septoria and all the other diseases are completely resistant to all the fungicides we've got, or that legislation removes even more pesticides, we need natural processes to support the farming activities. And that's biodiversity, whether it's varietal mixes, whether it's homes for beneficials, whether it's good rotations to control weeds. It's all it's part of an holistic, regenerative way of thinking about farming. You can't just say, is this strip cost effective? Because you can't look at it as an individual thing.
Julian, I've got another one for you here. Is there a fear that with the introduction of elms and the reduction of financial aid, could there be more farmers worried about adopting approaches like this, regardless of the short and long-term benefits to their business and surroundings? Is there something else that needs to be done to support with some farmers who will struggle to invest the money in it? What's your opinion?
Oh, hang on a minute. I'm struggling with that. So might have to say that again.
Is there a fear that with the introduction of ELMs and a reduction of financial aid, could there be more farmers that are worried about adopting this approach, regardless of the short and long-term benefits to their business and surroundings? Is there something else that needs to be done to help support farmers who are struggling to invest the money into it?
Well, the big thing here, I think, is ESG money and money from private equity rather than DEFRA, rather than RPA. The whole natural capital funding and money coming in to support farming practices. So we're getting less money from the RPA, but you're topping it off with ESG money. So, I'd like to think that I can roll my farming system out to some financial director in the city and say, look, this is what I'm doing. I'm enhancing the natural capital. Can you give me some money to do it? So I see that as the future going forwards. And there's obviously it sort of builds with carbon credits as well, particularly my strips that have got hedges in as well, where you've got an intense amount of carbon capture in a small area. So hopefully there's carbon credits in the future as well. But the fundamental thing as well is if somehow the public would be able to pay more for food produced on a regenerative system that's got wildflower strips and homes for beneficials and things, and then it's just a bit like the car factory analogy. Then you've got enough profit that you don't mind diverting some to environmental works. It's just, I appreciate that if profits are tight, it's very hard to do anything other than concentrate on the food production line. But it's a short-term view, that is, and eventually the wheels will drop off.
So I'm going to jump two more questions, then we'll come over to Richard. Julian, jump one question. Linking into that slightly, what would you do differently if you owned the land? You mentioned about towards the end there that what you would do, and you're putting trees in. The owners of the estate don't like the look of that. But what would you do differently if you owned the land?
If I own the land, I would put more agroforestry systems in, and so I would put trees in the strips, and probably just a bit more environmental work than I'm doing now. Probably more strips. And Richard's got a really good idea that I don't know. Hopefully, Richard will bring it up. The idea about the turning headlands. I'll just put that in there as a primer. Just probably more areas out of production, and sacrifice a little bit more of my bottom line. I think that all this stuff will become. It depends on what timescale you're looking forward. I tend to look forward in quite long timescales, and we need to sort out this natural capital degradation because it's going to really bite us otherwise.
Perfect. Last question from Tony. I'll just move my box. In my margins, over time, clover has taken over as the main species. Julian, are you sowing species which will last 4 to 5 years?
Well, I hope they will. But having said that, so I've got a lot of new ones in that we only planted last year under countryside stewardship. My other strips that are 5 years old now for the Assist project, they're not great, to be honest. They're predominantly oxeye daisy. And again, it's because of this fertile environment I'm working in. It is hard to establish and maintain diverse flower mixes in a fertile environment. I struggle, but I don't stop trying.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you, Julian. I'll give you a rest for a minute. As always, it's great fun firing questions at you and see what you get back. So thank you very much, and feel free to chip in as we go through, and I'm sure we'll have some questions more at the end as well. I'll take the opportunity to switch over to Richard Pywell. Richard, thank you very much for joining us this morning. You've obviously worked with Julian as well with the Assist project, so it all ties in nicely, and you understand what he's doing. And from a ecological point of view, you're coming in as our expert today to run us through why you think, what benefit you think these infill strips can bring to farmers and how they can use them to benefit. So yeah, if I hand over to you.
Okay, morning everybody, and also could I introduce Ben Woodcock from UKCEH, who leads the Assist trial with the infield strips. So Ben's here as well, so Ben can help answer questions as well. So okay, right, let me share my screen. I'll warn you all in advance. I think I've covered most of the topics, but they might not necessarily be in the right order. Can you see my screen?
Yep. You just need to click on the slideshow. There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Over to you.
Okay. So I've sort of split my talk into two. I've got sort of more of a background, and then I've sort of gone on to the more specifics around the strips. So just very quickly, I just want to say a few words of introduction about the Assist Achieving Sustainable Agricultural Systems programme, which funds the infield strip work. So it's a 6-year government-funded research programme, brings together the expertise of UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, Rothamsted Research. So it's BBSRC and NERC. So crop science and environmental science, and very much with the support of farmers like Julian and the farming industries. There's a strong practical input to this. And the aim is to develop ecologically based agricultural systems that are more efficient and resilient to future shocks. So it's working with the natural ecosystem as much as possible, but bringing the best of crop science to bear. And the aim is because it's government funded, we will provide data and tools and a long-term infrastructure of research and demonstration farms for the industry. So that's the sort of aim. Sorry, that's the advert for Assist. So I mentioned working with the farming industry. Specifically, we're very much at the beginning of Assist. We worked with them to identify the challenges that the industry faced in 2016, though things moved on. Very much sharing innovations, what was going on in the industry, and co-design the solutions. Oops, sorry. And then provide tools to improve environmental decision making. So this co-design you'll see throughout my presentation will come in. In terms of the challenges, very early on it was clear, as Julian alluded to, that there are fewer actives, pesticide ingredients being developed, and those that we have are increasingly under pressure in terms of resistance building very quickly. So we need to conserve these and only use them, as a sort of last resort, not first resort. So there was a strong push, a strong focus from the industry on IPM. That came out very clearly. The other thing that came out was it was a little before net zero, but it was more soil health, carbon was very much up there already in 2016. So when we designed the experiment. So just a bit of background on pest control. I mean, you're probably all aware of this, but invertebrates are responsible for a lot of loss of production worldwide that runs into billions. And yeah, the kind of foundation is native predatory invertebrates that feed on these pests are the things that we really want to encourage, and are much more effective in general at reducing the kind of the massive peaks, the outbreaks of pests, because you're getting that underlying consistent control all the time rather than a sort of massive outbreak. So yeah, this is very much key to IPM. In terms of pollination, we know that insect pollination increases yield and quality of crops, certainly globally, but in the UK, oilseed rape beans, apples, and glasshouse tomatoes are the prime candidates. It's even in the UK where we don't, we're not growing massive amounts of directly insect pollinated crops, it does add up to quite a lot of money. And our research and other research has shown wild pollinators are as important as honeybees for some crops. And we've only got enough honeybees to pollinate about a quarter of the UK crops. So, wild pollinators are important and we need them in that. So that's a bit of background, which you probably know. So really the core of this is, why natural pollination and pest control. So, as I said before, working with natural processes has to be more sustainable in the longer run. The natural ecosystem. It's Julian's factory analogy. And it's going to be a lower environmental risk and lower cost ultimately, and especially if the price of pesticides rises, if there's any form of taxation on pesticides, we're going to very much need to rely on that natural pest control. Also, clearly, as I said, it's going to maintain the actives we have because it will slow resistance build up. And allow farmers to keep the actives longer. It will also, if you get it right with conventional pesticides, it should make them more reliable in the longer run. And as I said before, in terms of pollination, there are proven benefits to yield and quality. And so ultimately, it's about building resilience of the business to the future. Again, back to Julian's analogy about the factory floor. You know, it's a bit of everything. We're not saying go organic, but we're saying, you know, work with the natural processes as much as possible. And in terms of evidence for this, in the UK a few years ago, we published a paper on the Hillsdon farm platform, so a 6-year study, very detailed study of 1,000-hectare commercial farm. This wasn't an experimental farm, this was a commercial farm. And we basically, in summary, what we did was we looked at removing, we looked at basically conventional agriculture cross compliance where no land was taken out of production. And it was just, you know, standard rules of cross compliance, and compared that with 3% of low yielding and awkward land removed and ELS as was put in, or 8% and essentially a HLS put in. And we created in the HLS, we very much focused on habitats for beneficials. So lots of pollen and nectar, lots of wildflower mixes were put in, tussocky with grass and things like that. And we showed, the monitoring showed that we very much increased the abundance of the beneficials, the natural enemies of crop pests and crop pollinators specifically. But the benefits took quite a time to emerge. It took about 3 years for the populations to respond. But we also found that after 3 years, we did get an increase in the yield of some crops of up to 35%, particularly insect pollinated crops. And no net loss of other in the other crops. So this is taking account of that land you've taken out of production. So, you know, there's some interesting evidence, albeit not directly linking to pest control on pollination, but there was, you know, tantalizing evidence that by doing this and focusing on habitat for beneficials, you can increase yields of some crops and you're not suffering a net loss in others. And the paper's free to download, so you don't need a subscription to Proceedings of the Royal Society. So if you haven't read it, it's worth a look. So that's the first piece of evidence. And so, however, there are a sort of number of challenges around enhancing natural pollination and pest control. I think the key thing is that farm landscapes are inherently have relatively low abundance and diversity of the species you want. So this is not just biodiversity per se, these are the natural enemies and the crop pollinators. They're just generally, farm landscapes are quite inhospitable for these species. And that's largely down to lack of suitable habitat more than anything else. You know, other things come into play, but it's lack of habitat is the key driver. And the other issue is that large agricultural fields are both inhospitable and large, and so you've got low movement rates of these species into the field, and it takes time. So they do get there, but it takes them a long time, or some of them don't ever make it into the centre. So you've got an issue with getting the beneficials into the centres of the fields and quickly. And then the other thing is, the other challenge around this whole natural pest control is that we really still lack the right monitoring tools and advice to work this in with IPM. Most farmers, or a lot of farmers, you know, will spray insecticides, you know, as an insurance policy, and they don't know what to look for in their fields to say, wait a minute, if I hang on, but if I keep my nerve, you know, this will be fine, and I don't need to blitz everything with a non-selective insecticide and kill. So again, I think better monitoring, and there are some technological advances that could help us with this. So that's sort of background. Richard, I don't know whether you want me to stop here and then pick up on the kind of more practical aspects, or carry on.
Carry on, Richard, by all means. Thank you.
Okay, right. So in terms of sort of looking at these challenges, said there's low abundance and low diversity of the key species for effective IPM. And a colleague of ours at CEH, Aaron Greenock, published a meta-analysis in 2018 where he looked into natural pest control globally. And he concluded that basically natural pest control was generally more effective where management was in place to enhance the diversity of predators, but not just their diversity, what we call functional traits or characteristics. A good example of a functional trait is a hunting strategy or prey preference, or the the size of the animal. And what we mean by this is the analogy is the sort of ladybird aphid carabid story, where your ladybird is an aerial predator of aphids in the canopy. And so they'll fly around and they'll eat aphids as they see them on the wheat plant. But the aphid's natural defense is to drop to the ground when it sees the ladybird. So some of the aphids will escape the ladybird by dropping to the ground, where they're promptly eaten by carabids, because they've got the ladybird and the carabid have got two very different hunting strategies. One is an aerial predator, simply, one is a ground predator. And so together, they're going to add up to a lot more pest control than if you just had ladybirds or you just had carabids. So it's this idea of increasing not just diversity, but functional diversity. And now the practical way of doing that is if you just push diversity, you will naturally get the higher the generally, if you can maximize diversity, you will end up with higher functional diversity. But it does mean thinking more than just aerial predators. It's ground predators, it's parasitoids, it's the whole lot. So that's a sort of useful background. Diversity is the key. So the problem we face is this deficit of natural pest control and pollination. And Ben, who's on the call, a few years ago published an analysis looking at the diversity and functional diversity and species richness of natural predators and the crop pollinating bees, and showed that there were sort of quite worryingly low levels of functional diversity in the major crop growing areas. So there is room for improvement. No cause for alarm perhaps, but room for improvement, especially if the systems are challenged by things like climate change and other things. So functional diversity is really important, and we have an issue that we need to address. And the way that traditionally we've addressed this without probably realizing it is sort of wildflower margins. And the thing with wildflower margins is you get these kind of multiple benefits, which include pollination and pest control. So a few years ago, a good number of years ago now, we did the Buzz study, which was a forerunner for a lot of the prescriptions that went into elms and ultimately countryside stewardship, where what we were comparing is crop to the edge, where you've got the 20% yield decline. Sorry, did I just drop out there? Or no, back in.
No, you're there.
Yeah, so you've got the crop to the edge with 20% yield decline. We compared that with a standard grass margin, 145 quid per hectare, and then a wildflower flower margin, at 360 upwards. And we looked at a whole range of benefits from carbon capture, nutrient cycling as measured by worm counts, pollination, and pest control. And whatever you look at, you can see the wildflower margins are delivering more benefits than the standard grass margins for the money. And so this multifunctional benefit thing was sort of known, and so it's something that we needed to sort of work upon. We knew we were on the right lines. And some years after this, Ben did some much more detailed work looking at the direct benefits of wildflower margins and grass margins, specifically for insect or crop pest predators, so natural enemies of crop pests, and showed from 4 commercial farms where he compared wildflower margins and typical grass margins that on the grass margins, on the bar on the left, you always get greater abundance of sort of beneficials. In this case, I'm showing surface active predators. So sowing flowers, it confirms, but it's not just generalist pest control. There's more specific pest control. Sowing flowers, you get more beneficials. And indeed, Claire Carvel, who works at CEH, showed that this isn't just a honeypot, particularly for pollinators. If you sow pollen and nectar mixes for bees, in this case, you get a population increase over time. So it's not just attracting the bees in this case, or the beneficials from over the hedge to the flowers, and then they will disappear again. This is genuinely over time, you will build up populations, and we showed this at the Hillston platform for, in this case, bees that pollinate crops that you're going to get bigger populations over time. So this is Claire did a genetic analysis showing that family lineage survival was increased by sowing wildflower and pollen and nectar habitats in the on the Hillsdon farm platform. So again, evidence of population increases, which is what you need. You don't just want to drag them from, you know, Julian's neighbour onto Julian's farm. You want them permanently on your farm. So a question that Richard asked me was, well, what species do you want to sow if you want to increase natural pest control? And there's various sources of advice, and obviously Marek was mentioned earlier, and there's Marek's Bee Book, which is a good starting place for just general wildflowers, but particularly focused on pollinators. And you may not know, but Marek has recently published an updated, detailed leaflet that accompanies the book. And this is, sorry, it's very, it's complicated to explain. But this basically, these are all of the bumblebees and solitary bees and honeybees that you find typically on arable agricultural sites. On the left-hand side, there's about 40 or 50 species. And then along the top, there's a calendar, basically from early March through to the end of August. And they're split into hedgerow species and trees and wildflowers. And the symbols also indicate commercial availability of those species, i.e., you've got a symbol, you can buy those species. And it shows for each of the bumblebees, solitary bees, honeybees, the interaction, the use, the importance of those hedgerow and wildflower species for each. And you can probably make out there are different densities of shading, which indicates the strength of that interaction, i.e. the importance. And, you know, so you can use this to design a hedgerow mix or a whole farm plan, which will provide pollen and nectar for the greatest range, greatest functional diversity of crop pollinators across the year, which is what they need for their populations to increase. It's freely available. You can download it as a PDF. I've got stacks of them in my office, so if you do want a paper copy, I'm happy to post some out to you. In terms of the assist seed mix for beneficials, we did a literature review that looked into all of the beneficial species that we wanted to increase for the arable crops we were growing. And we sort of looked into the life cycle and what those species really needed to complete their life cycle. And just to add to that, though, the schematic that I'm showing here is also showing that we wanted other benefits from the infield strips. You know, things like carbon capture and erosion control, wind erosion, particularly on peat soils. We wanted to increase water infiltration and things like that. So as well as pollination and pest control, we did need other things. So we've designed a sort of structural and in terms of structure and composition we were focusing on. So in terms of guiding sort of principles for the seed mix, we knew that with Marek's help, we knew we needed a kind of robust and easy to establish set of perennial species. I emphasize perennial because they need to be cut a lot in the first year to control weeds like blackgrass. As Julian has mentioned, there are fertility issues. So again, they need to be able to cope with the sort of high fertility situations in central fields. So establish easily managed by cutting, commercially available, reasonable cost. Provide a structure, as I said, so you need overwintering habitats for things like carabids. You also ideally need a sort of green fence or windbreak if you can to stop any sort of minor drift of pesticides, herbicides into the strip. You need open flower structures for natural enemies. Most of the aerial predators of aphids, for example, like open flowers to get nectar and pollen, sometimes for some refueling, if you like, before they go out back into the crop. So lots of open flowers. Need a kind of progression of flowering from early through to late season, particularly for the pollinators. And we wanted a reasonable seed rate that wasn't going to break the bank, so 4 kilograms of flowers at 10 kilos of grass. This was, though, is an experimental seed mixture, and it will be refined as we learn from the assist study. But the sorts of open flowers we've put in, things like yarrow, carrot, knapweed, we've got a lot of umbellifers, like things like hedge parsley, chervil, wild parsnip, which are again these open flowers, candelabras almost for the beneficials to get nectar on. Oxeye daisy, as Julian has mentioned, and the sort of open daisy-like flowers, things like scabious and hawksbill and fleabane as well. And then for the pollinators, what we've focused on there are the sort of progression of flowering through the season, starting even with dandelion, which is a good early season plant and is easy to establish, and then going through the midsummer into the late summer with some of the legumes. So sort of an idea of the sort of species that we put in and the principles behind the seed mix, but I'm sure that this will be refined at the end of the study. So the other issue, once you've got the habitat right, the other challenge, if you recall the challenges that I mentioned at the beginning, is how do we get these species from the crop edge into the center of the crop? So we know sowing flowers, providing habitat, increases the functional diversity. And we know from Ben's work, again, this is on pollinators, that honeybees are actually quite good. They will fly all the way into the center of large fields, up to 200 meters in this case of this study. But the key thing is only when the hive's present. If you haven't got a beekeeper nearby, you're not going to get any honeybees. So you won't get any pollination from them. And as I said, there's only enough honeybees for about a quarter of the crops. So, whilst they're mobile, and that's good, the issue is that you need a beekeeper, basically. And then when you look at the wild pollinators, bumblebees, solitary bees, it's noticeable that their dispersal ability is much less, and they tend to fall off after around sort of 80, 90, 100 meters into the crop. They're not traveling as far. And other work that went alongside this did show that the solitary bees are much more efficient pollinators, crop pollinators, than honeybees. And the reason for this is it's just their feeding ecology. They tend to get covered in pollen all over their bodies, whereas honeybees, as you can see, they store the pollen in a ball on their leg and carry it back to the hive. And that's wet pollen, so it doesn't transfer, doesn't do it easily to stigma. And bumblebees are the same. They put the pollen on a ball and carry it back to their larvae. So there's less chance of that pollen transfer. Whereas solitary bees don't do that. They get covered in pollen, and their feeding ecology, they're smaller also, and they tend to crawl around all over the flower, and they're much more likely to make stigma contact. So, they're more effective pollinators than bombus and honeybees, though these two species can fulfill an important pollination service because there's just many more of them, basically. So dispersal distance is a problem for pollination, crop pollination. Ben, you also showed that it's also a problem for natural enemies of crop pests. And so what we did was we put some clip cages containing aphids, cereal aphids, into cereal crops at different distances from grass margins and flower margins with set numbers of aphids and established little colonies at 10 and 50 meters from the edge. And we did tell the farmers we were doing this. And then what we did was we went back every day or so and counted how many aphids were left in the colonies. And the diagram shows that for the grass-only margins, the red bars, the aphid colonies, this is the axis is the days to aphid colony depth. So, how long were those colonies surviving? And basically, next to the grass margins, the colonies were lasting sort of upwards of 10 up to 15 days. So they were doing okay, and they didn't seem to be reducing. And there was sort of no real difference at the distance into the crop. So there wasn't brilliant, basically that's telling us there was not brilliant control of aphids from those grass margins. Whereas the flower-rich margins, the blue bars, next to the flower-rich margin, you're getting good aphid control. The colonies only survive 3 or 4 days and they're gone. So good natural control of them. They're all gone, eaten up. But 50 meters, you're sort of getting quite long-term survival, which is suggesting that spillover of natural pest control is not traveling very far into the fields. And we're not alone. Other studies have shown this as well. So this kind of problem of poor dispersal of natural enemies and time to dispersal is the key issue, really. That was the sort of evidence. I've got some slides on assist. Richard, should we stop there, or do you want to press on?
Should we go to some questions and then then maybe, all right?
Okay. Stop sharing.
A couple coming in. Chervil is becoming a problem in some commercial crops. What experience is there with species and strips spreading and becoming a problem in the field cash crop alongside it? Sorry, I didn't read that very well. Or have we lost Richard entirely? Ben?
Yeah, I'm giving kind of response. So, in the context of what we're looking at the moment in the Assist project, a big part of it is trying to understand the consistency and value of these infield strips across a range of different sites, range of different soil types, and range of different management approaches. We're doing ongoing management and a big ongoing monitoring, and a big part of that is trying to understand the distribution of weed species going into the crop, because obviously it is a potential risk, and it's it's something that you need to trade off on that. The big one that we've been focusing on is blackgrass, to be honest with you, because that's probably the more obvious weed species. But as part of our ongoing monitoring, we basically look at all weed species that we identify in the crop, and that's looking at increasing distances going in from the edge as well as in from the individual fill margins. So short answer is ongoing monitoring, and there's a big part of this. As Richard said, the kind of big primer for this particular research was the study that was undertaken at Hillston that strongly suggested this could have an effect. The Assist study, which Julian is a part of, is trying to understand, does this actually work consistently? Because if you can get it to work on one site, that's great. But what you need to understand is, does it work every time? And if it doesn't work every time, where is it failing? And it's those kind of things that we're trying to ask for this. So short answer, no, we don't know at the moment, but long answer, we will do in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, the species that we've got in the seed mix, that they're, as I say, there are no real no-nos. We haven't sown anything that's going to cause a problem like a perennial ryegrass that's going to be resistant to herbicide or something. So, it's hard enough to establish wildflowers at the best of times. So blowing, just to answer Julian's point about blowing, once this strip is established and you've got rid of the annual grass weeds, i.e. you've just got wildflowers, I would say blowing the cuttings into the stubble, or the chance of anything, sort of spreading into the crop, is pretty minimal, because they're wildflower species that, are, one, hard to establish on arable soils at sometimes, and two, they don't have known herbicide resistance to them. So I think it's a balance. You've got to look at the risk, but we as Ben says, we're monitoring to see if there is a problem, but I haven't, at the sites I visited, I haven't noticed a problem.
Can I just make a little practitioner's comment on that? Yeah, theoretically it's a possibility, but in practice, as Rich was saying, the herbicides are so good, the herbicide programs that we're using in the fields, particularly in a blackgrass environment, and the herbicide sequences, that you pretty well control everything anyway. So in practice, it's not an issue at the moment, but I do see potentially, if our herbicide armory is continually reduced and some of these more effective herbicides can't be used, it could be a potential problem in the future more.
Yeah, but cutting and baling, as you say, Julian, avoids the problem. I mean, it's just how you deal with it.
Richard, you mentioned they're kind of like harder to establish areas. If you've got quite a heavy farm, would you benefit from kind of using increasing the seed rates, using straight mixes, or kind of using straights?
This is, as Ben alluded to, this is why we're doing the study. I'll talk about it in more detail in the second half, but this is why we're doing the study on 20 commercial farms, because you've got a real range of soil types, from sort of literally brick clay at Hillston to chalk over near Salisbury, and sand at Broom's Barn. So we've got real range, and I suspect the seed mixture is going to perform very differently across those soil types. As I say, the seed mix is rather a kind of throw a load of stuff in and just see how it performs. We wouldn't say this is the suggested and recommended list of things. At the end of the study, we'll boil it down and say, this is what we think perform well, and it seemed to work well with the beneficials as well. So trying to focus, not just sowing a standard wildflower mix. It's trying to and we know we've got some things slightly wrong because we've put some species in that we think actually, that's probably now not the best thing to have done, but that's how you develop these things.
Part of the choice of species that we went for very much was trying to maximize resources, not just for pollinators, which is what everybody thinks of when they think of flowering margins, but also for a lot of the predatory species. So some of the very long flowered plants, stuff like clovers, they're not very accessible for, say, parasitic wasps or hoverflies, that predatory on aphids. As a direct result, what this means is that the kind of fecundity of these species is not really maximized. So the kind of species that we've been sowing have tried to have very open flowers, which are very accessible. And if you take something like parasitic wasps, if they're able to feed on pollen, they're able to feed on nectar, their number of eggs that they can lay goes up dramatically. And it is those kind of things that we're trying to maximize. But what goes with that is not all those species established on all soil types. And again, this is like one of those things that I suspect will drive that intersite variance that we're going to see in relation to this. And this is one of the things about trying to drive natural pest control. It is not a guaranteed thing. It will not. It's a contributory factor that works in combination with other management practices, and it's trying to understand where that fits in within that spectrum. And it'd be lovely to say, hey, this works every time. You can use this, you can rely on this. And it's probably not like that. But what it is trying to define that space where this is a realistic level of acceptability. If you do these management practices, as Julian says, if you look after, that kind of the farm factory building, as it were, this will provide that background level of support that you can rely on. You're going to need other approaches, cultural approaches, timing of when you sow. You're going to need the kind of plant protection products in there, but it's working out that kind of parameter space where you can rely on it and informing you, hopefully as well, those indicators that you can use to say, right, this is looking good, I can rely on this, or this is looking bad.
Well, like all things in farming, there's no one silver bullet as well. And this fits into a bigger picture of things, like Julian showed. Ben, while we got you there, there's one question here from Celine. Can the positions of the strips and prevailing wind make a difference for the not so strong flyers like parasitoid wasps?
So my suspicion is it might have an effect, but we haven't really looked at it. And truthfully, the orientation of strips is normally dictated by the kind of the field traditional orientation of where it's been sown. Particularly if you've got controlled traffic, you're unlikely to kind of switch that round to get the kind of best orientation. I wouldn't rule it out. My experience with a lot of insects, and when you actually collect them, there's methods for collecting them that rely on the fact that insects like going along linear boundaries. They like flying along hedgerows. They kind of orientate themselves along this. So this is one of the reasons why we think, if you stick a strip through, say, something like oilseed rape, it has an effect. Because obviously oilseed rape is a massive area of flowers. They're not going along these strips because there's a few flowers in there. But what a lot of these predatory insects or parasitoids do is they orientate by going along these linear boundaries. So they're actually flying into the fields, making use of these areas and then kind of entering into them. So yeah, it could do, but I suspect it's relatively probably trivial compared to other factors like getting the seed mix right and the management right.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ben. Richard, should we go back to you for the final instalment? Is that? Well, I think you're on mute. Sorry, I think they've been playing around with the.
Yeah.
There
Sorry.
you go.
That's
Perfect.
Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. So part two. Okay. So so just going to say a few words about the assist experiment and the setup and the infield strips, which will hopefully sort of complement what Julian said earlier. So as part of assist, what we're doing is we set up an experiment in 2017 to 17 to sort of look at the kind of effectiveness or look at ways of improving IPM with infield strips and other approaches, and also this kind of soil health question and resilience to sort of climate change and things like that. So we set up an experiment addressing those challenges that we identified at the beginning of assist, We're working with a network of 20 commercial arable farms. And the reason we're very keen to work with commercial farmers is it is a real world test of how you bring this kind of ecological farming together with the best of agritech. And the farmers we're working with are large mechanized farms like Julian. They've got the kit, they've got the DG, the RTK GPS, so that they're really, switched on to precision agriculture as well, and that's quite important, we believe. 20 farms gives us some statistical power. We've been talking about soil types and locations, and so it's important that we test across these different variables, and slight differences in farming systems as well. I think from an AHDB perspective, and I know you've sort of taken this opportunity. Everyone agrees that seeing is believing. So if you can bring farmers to a sort of well-run commercial farm and show them in-field strips and soil management, you're going to get much more from it in terms of technology transfer. And even better if you can bring together that with research findings, so there's data to back it up. So, we're a great believer in that whole idea of the experiment being part of the technology transfer, or knowledge transfer route. And then we're also running a sort of similar setup, looking at issues with grass farming as well, though there aren't as many sites. But we've got a similar principle. We haven't got time today to go into it, but it's essentially looking at things like herbal lays and mob stocking, and those benefits to sort of carbon capture, production, sustainability in the livestock system. So the experiment, so this is 20 farms. We have the same setup on all 20 farms. Each farm has provided us with 3 fields on the same soil type and in the same part of the rotation. The first field is the control, which is no intervention, business as usual. The second field is what we call supporting beneficials, or IPM, and soil health. And here what we do is we have 2 of the assist seed mixes. We have the assist seed mix on 2 opposing or opposite field margins. So a fairly conventional setup as you would find in agri-environment schemes at the field edge. And 2 years out of 5, we're putting cover crops on with spring crops. So we're sowing a consistent cover crop mix across all 20 farms. So that's what we might call the sort of minimal supporting the soil health and beneficials. And then the third field is what we call maximising, where we've got all the same as field 2. We've got the assist mixes on the field edges, but we've also got infield strips, so we're overcoming that dispersal limitation. We've got the cover crops, 2 years out of 5, and to this we've also added a dose of compost, 30 tonnes a hectare, or FYM, 1 year out of 5, depending on where the rotation is. So we've given it a good dose of organic matter as well to try and reboot the soil system. So that's the experiment, common to all 20 sites. So this is the infield strip, the solution, if you like, to the overcoming the lack of habitat and lack of dispersal ability of the beneficial. So how do you get them to the middle of the field? So it's very much co-designed with farmers like Julian as a practical farming solution. 6 metre sown strip with perennial seed mix for weed control. Lots of cutting in year 1. We farm around the ends. This came back very strongly after the first year, that farmers didn't want to connect to the headlands. And we don't actually see there's a biological reason, because that the beneficials can move a short distance, and also they'll colonize this habitat. It's a permanent habitat, so they should colonize it and take up, many of them should take up residence there. So farm around the end, don't put more corners into your field and make life harder, which came back very strongly. Robust species, as we've said, and ideally, we originally had the idea of this tall green fence of tussocky grasses as a narrow strip at the edges. That proved challenging to drill because it means drilling essentially two different seed mixes. So we've actually achieved the same thing by, under experimental license, applying a graminicide in the winter to the central 4 metres to leave 1 metre of tall grass to protect the inner core That was done last year. Although some farmers have been able to, some farmers, depending on their drill setup, can actually drill 1 metre green fence and then 4 metres grass, flowers, and then another 1 metre green fence. As Julian said, there is an option to plant the centres of the strips with a hedge. I mean, that's going to presumably increase the benefits as well for natural enemies and pollinators as well, and also carbon capture. So this is what the infield strips look like. This is a large field with 3 strips. You can see this has been laid out. What they've done is they've essentially set the strips as headlands in the field, and then they've drilled off them and set the tram lines from them. So it isn't difficult with modern farming equipment and GPS to do this. So this works perfectly well with this farming system, and you can see they're farming around the ends. The tram lines go around the ends, and it enables, so it's no extra encumbrance on the farming system. And then just to sort of pick up, I know this isn't the subject that we're talking about today, but just to mention this idea that it's important we also look at the other elements, the other challenges. And so, we are looking at soil health, soil structure, microbes and things like that, to see if the cover crops and the nutrients are benefiting soil health. But also there could, and it's important to recognise this is a linked system, this is an ecosystem. And if you've added cover crops and organic matter, you're going to increase, presumably, soil mites and soil dwelling organisms that are breaking down that organic matter, which are also going to feed caribids, who are generalist predators. And so their populations are going to benefit, but then those caribids will be eating, potentially, aphids in the autumn that are passing on BYDV. So, you've got this sort of, potential for sort of, soil health benefits are going to maybe have an additive effect to pest control. This is something we're exploring in the project. In terms of monitoring, so we're looking at a whole range of things, and as Ben mentioned, everything is measured away from the infield strips or the field edges, field margins. So we're looking at how that the effect of location and distance into the field is affecting all of these parameters. So crop yield, nutrients, organic matter, microbes, greenhouse gases, more of that in a minute, carbon capture, clearly pests and weeds. Yeah, as we mentioned before, we want to know whether we're causing weed problems or more pest problems. Beneficials, crop pollinators, both in the margins and strips and into the crop, and wider biodiversity. Although Julian's counting deer, we aren't formally measuring deer numbers, but we are looking at wider biodiversity. And so, in terms of carbon capture, some of the infield strips have got the eddy covariance flux tau, so we're measuring net carbon budget for the whole field. Now this is paired with the control field, so we're looking at carbon capture, both of the infield strips and, most importantly, the cover crops, to see whether they're having a benefit over and above the control field, where you don't get either of those. And that's proving to be quite useful in terms of information and evidence and additional benefits of the infield strips. And then, so Richard asked me, what to look for, what are we after? Well, we're monitoring all of these things, but we're looking at the sort of generalist ground beetles, caribids and road beetles. We're looking at spiders, obviously key predators, lacewings, hoverflies, ladybirds, parasitoids as well, focusing on key interactions with crop pests like flea beetles and aphids. So yeah, generally looking at a very wide range of these natural enemies using traditional techniques. So this is, whether it be pitfall trapping or hand trapping for pollinators and other aerial predators, also vortice sampling, and also searches as well. So with the expertise of Rothamsted, we're looking at these very sort of detailed interactions between the parasitoids and the pests. So that's what we're sort of looking for, and this is a picture. This is a picture of this is one of the assist fields, and this is a caribou beetle eating or about to eat a slug. So yeah, we do know that the natural pest control is taking place, and we are counting all these things. As I say, we will be reporting in due course on all this. We're just beginning year 4, so this is the final year of the study. So we're sort of, or Ben can give you an update on where we are with the data and all that. But as I say, we're in the middle of the monitoring, realistically. And the final thing I was going to say, I mentioned a challenge of lack of information on the abundance and diversity of beneficials and pests in the field, and that is a problem for IPM, because farmers tend to spray as an insurance policy, and if we have better information, they may not spray as often if they knew that there were plenty of beneficials or there weren't that many pests in the field. And we're very much working with data scientists at the moment to develop image recognition techniques for rapid and low-cost monitoring of pests, but most importantly, beneficials. We know that we've already got a mobile phone app which can use image recognition to identify plant species very effectively. We have one also that identifies moths and pollinators. And so the next step for us, the logical step, is to apply this image recognition technology to pests and beneficials. And it's just really, this is a very crude prototype which we were looking at a year or so ago, just to capture images on a yellow sticky trap in Julian's field. And Julian's and Marek are looking very, very skeptical, but we do know the technology works. It's just a case of just training it really and getting the images of the key species and enough of them, and the algorithm will identify them. And sets, developing the hardware actually is possibly the problem. Working out what sort of lure system we use, tracking system we use for the different crops and the different species. So I'll leave it there, just food for thought. But that's what we're working on at the moment, are these image recognition systems, because we think that's also very key to improve IPM.
Thank you, Richard. If I look at that photo, Julian and Marek take some convincing.
Yeah.
just kind of coming back to that, the point on technology. Is there any opportunity for drones to be a kind of a monitoring device, kind of even with slugs? I was thinking of with a kind of like thermal or moisture, or are they too far underground? The drones, have they got a part to play?
You can imagine, particularly you see it in oilseed rape crops, don't you? You can see the slug damage, I don't see why not, Richard. I mean, it's all part of the same thing. Anything to gather a high resolution image, and then you use image recognition techniques to classify the image, recognize what the issue is. I don't see why not. It's just it's the same application of the same technology to a slightly different problem. A little bit of a different scale, but we think there is potential in this. I mean, these systems are already sort of all more or less working for high-value horticultural crops, and with very specific pest issues. And I don't. Maybe we wouldn't have a network of this sort of monitoring on every farm, but if you had a network, you could start to do some regional forecasting and send out alerts. I think that's probably where this would start. But as I say, the technology is there. Everyone owns a mobile phone, and just clicking an image and letting the classifier for the moths. All you do is you take a picture of what the moths that you find in the trap, and it goes away and classifies them and counts them and tells you what you've got. And then for a pest and beneficial IPM setup, you would need some sort of underlying model to say, with this at this time of the year, with these weather conditions and these pests and these beneficials, is it advisable to let them get on with it and continue, or do we need to spray? It's a risk.
Philip on the chat's bringing out his entrepreneur side. He says that he saw somewhere that recently there is a phone app that measures the insects on car number plates, and maybe this could be transferred.
Yeah, I've seen that. That was advertised. Yeah, there was some stuff in the news about that. Yeah, the squished bugs on your number plate, or yes, your wing mirrors. Yeah.
Got a question from Ruth. Are there any guidelines for how and when to drill and where to place the strips?
So yes, it's. I mean, this is Marek's area, but Marek would say drill. You've got two drilling opportunities, one in the autumn, one in the spring. But with arable cropping, it's so it's going to be one of those two. Late August, early September, at the very latest, is the optimum time to drill. Or in the spring, you're looking at sort of April, early April time. The soil temperature's right. The key bit of guidance is the bee book, actually, because that goes into a lot. Marek's distilled all his knowledge in that, and he talks about the type of seed, way to get the seed bed, what to look for, and when, particularly when to drill and how to drill. Leave the seeds on the surface and roll. Do not drill them. Do not put them at depth. But I'm perhaps the expert, and it's all in that book.
Okay. Julian, I'll bring you in there.
Yeah, if I could just add to that. From my experience, I've had a few failed strips. Autumn is way safer. Spring is very dangerous. If you enter a dry spell, very end of August, early September, and like Richard said, don't drill them, broadcast them.
Okay.
Yeah. Because they're small, very small seeds. So if you bury them, they just won't come up.
Perfect.
But it's that fine and firm seed bed, decent seed bed, and you'll get, and the better the seed bed, the lower the seed rate you need. It's just the same as farming. You just and so it's all those things. You'll save yourself money if you invest in a good seed. You get a good seed bed, and you get good weed control on that seed bed beforehand, because you just don't need as many seeds then to get success.
Great. My final question is might sound quite basic, but kind of if you sat on this kind of workshop and you're thinking kind of there's a lot of ways to monitor and measure what you're doing here, what would be your first thing to measure if you were kind of setting off on this journey and you wanted to monitor how your progress and how you're doing? What would be the first thing, in your opinion, that you should start with?
In terms of natural pest control,
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, what you're interested in is the yield of the crop, and so I suppose that's really, you would want to see, an improvement or at least a more resilient yield through time, and the way, but you've got to compare yourself to others locally, regionally, but you would want to see your crop doing better in terms of yield, performance.
And it's hard to quantify as well, isn't it? It's a visual thing initially. It's like my aerial shot of those 3 oilseed rape fields. It's particularly useful if you've got an identical field in an identical situation to compare with, one with strips and one without, as we've got. And literally, I've got a field with no slug damage and a field where there was multiple slug pellet passes and still lost 50% of the crop. And it might or might not have been the strips, but this is the thing that hopefully the scientists will eventually tell me when they've analysed all the carabid beetle counting, and hopefully they can tie the two things together and say, well, actually, there was a big population of carabid beetles in that field.
That photo we've got was taken on your farm, so we know at least one of the slugs got eaten.
Oh, right. Okay. Good.
Brilliant. We're nearing the end now, so I'll bring that to close. I just wanted to thank Richard, Julian, and Ben for their fantastic input today. It's been a kind of really insightful, fantastic workshop, and hit the briefing full on. And thank you to all of you for the effort and taking the time out this morning. Really appreciate it. This is obviously the first of 2 workshops today. If you'd like to kind of go, the next one later on this morning at 11 o'clock is really focusing on the strategic farms, the farmers, and we've got Patrick Barker showing us what he's doing, and we're looking at the measurements coming out of the strips that they're doing with the researchers there, and it's really kind of delving another step further into the actual results that they're getting and kind of how do you interpret those. So if you'd like to come along to that, then please do. It's at 11 o'clock, similar format to this. And then next week, the final workshop for the strategic farm month is the understanding your margins, your marginal land, beforehand, and that's again a kind of a foundation and a advanced workshop in the day, so similar format. So all that leaves me to do is to thank everybody again. Julian, there's calls on the chat that you joined Twitter. I think, I don't know if the world of Twitter is ready for Julian Gold, but we'll have to warn them in advance, I think. But so watch this space. But thank you very much, Abby, and thank you to a great group and a great audience for bringing in so many different points and questions and challenges. So see you all soon and have a good day. Cheers.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.